everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Ann Crawford and I'm the Reference and Adult Services Librarian at the Ponte Vedra Beach Branch Library. And I'm so glad you decided to join me for my presentation on time travel reads. Right now there's not a whole lot of traveling going on at all. And for anyone who's ever escaped into a good book, you know that it can take you all sorts of places. So I thought today I would share with you one of my favorite genres, time travel, which really will take you to a whole other place indeed. So I'm going to dive in with some of my favorite books that you can find in Libby, which is our database for downloadable ebooks and audiobooks, and you can access it for free with your St. Johns County Library card or with your free e-card that you can get on our website, SJCPLS.org. And I thought today I would cover some favorite adult time travel books, some teen time travel books, as well as some kids time travel books. So really everyone is welcome to join me for this presentation. Some of you who are my age or older probably remember the Calgon commercial, Calgon, take me away. And it's a really nice idea until you're in a bubble bath that's gotten cold and you're starting to get wrinkly like a raisin. The nice thing about books is there's no such expiration date. So if you're ready to do some armchair traveling with me and travel through time and put yourself in the place of the character as to what would you do if this happened to you, then let's dive on in. All right, so first I thought I'd start with Outlander. Many of you may be familiar with the Outlander series because you have a subscription to Starz, and they are currently on season 5, which covers the 5th book, The Fiery Cross. Right now there's 8 books in the series. Supposedly the 9th book is supposed to come out this year. So for those of you who have read this series, you've been waiting many years for that 9th book. So actually for those of you new to the series, this is a great time to dive into this series because you won't have to wait nearly so long for the next story. And in fact, there's supposed to be 10 stories in the entire series. So we have no idea when that 10th book is going to come out. There's also several side stories. Like I said, there's the Starz adaptation of Outlander, and it really is an incredible tale. So if you're looking to deep dive into something that is a true escape, I can't recommend Outlander more highly than I already am. Basically, the story of Outlander is about a 1940s nurse, Claire Randall, who has just finished her service in World War II. And so her husband, Frank Randall, and she decide to go to Scotland for their second honeymoon. They got married right before the war, so this is really a chance for them to get to know each other again. So they go to Scotland, which is a beautiful country. Some of my ancestors came from Scotland, so it's on my bucket list of places to visit. But for now, at least I feel like I can visit it through the story. So they go to Scotland to have the second honeymoon. And one day, Claire decides to go out and search for some flowers that she's been really interested in, that she thought that she saw when she was out in the Highlands. And so she's gone to investigate again. And so she goes up to this circle of stones. And when she goes up to the stones are making this buzzing sound. This really peculiar buzzing sound that she can't seem to figure out. So curiosity takes over. She walks up, she touches one of the stones, and the next thing you know, she's fallen through the stones, and instead of being 1945, it's 1743. Only she doesn't realize it's 1743. She is confused because she hears gunshots, so she runs down the hill and runs into her husband's ancestor, Black Jack Randall. And the twist here is that Frank Randall is very interested in history, whereas Claire is not. So she hasn't really been paying attention to all the genealogy kind of discoveries he's been making about his ancestors, and she realizes right away that this is not her husband. This is a really bad person. Gets rescued by a Highlander, and thus begins the story where she meets Jamie, who she falls in love with. And the question is, will she go back to her own time? Will she stay with Jamie? The 1700s are an incredibly dangerous place. They're building up to the Battle of Culloden. Later, the question becomes, can they stop the Battle of Culloden? Now that she knows what the outcome is going to be, can they prevent what's going to happen, the utter destruction of that whole way of life? But that's only just the first book or two. Like I said, there's 8 books in the entire story. So It really is an epic tale, and really puts you in the place of the character. That's one of the things that I find so incredibly gripping about time travel fiction, in a way that maybe historical fiction isn't. When you read historical fiction, or even when you read science fiction about the future, you're kind of having to imagine what it's like in those times. And not that that's not compelling on its own. What's interesting about time travel, though, is it takes you, the reader, and kind of puts you in the place of the time traveler, that fish out of water, in a totally different time period. What would you do? How would you fit in? What would you change? And what would happen if you changed it? Or can you change anything at all? Or just how would it all play out? There's a lot of really juicy questions there that I think time travel really allows you to step into the role of the narrator and time travel with them. So like I said, Outlander is an incredible story. I think they're doing a good job with it on Stars. We own all 8 books, plus all the side books, and everything else Diana Gabaldon wrote, who is the author of the Outlander series, and it's all available in Libby. So like I said, if you're looking for a deep dive to really kind of get out of your own headspace, I couldn't recommend it higher. So the next story we have, The Time Traveler's Wife. Okay, so this is a different twist on time travel, and that's another interesting thing about time travel fiction. Not every book is the same. In fact, quite often they're not. They have different rules of how time travel works, or how time travel impacts the narrator or the people around them, and The Time Traveler's Wife is certainly a great example of that. The Time Traveler's Wife was recommended to me by Susan Flynn, who was the original branch manager of the Anastasia Island Branch Library. She and I helped open that library together back in 2007, and we worked together at the Southeast Library and opened that library together in 2003. And so she recommended this story to me, and much like the Outlander series and a couple other adult books I'm going to mention, it was quite the tome. It was a big book. Not that I'm afraid of big books, but I thought, this could be an investment. So I decided to give it a shot, and I'm really, really glad I did. They made a movie out of it. Of course, the movie had to leave a lot out, but I thought the leads were very compelling. Essentially, in this story, is about Henry de Tamble, and he's a librarian. So, of course, I did enjoy that aspect. But the thing is his mother dies in a horrific car accident when he's 5, and starting at the age of 5, he involuntarily time travels to different points in his own life. He has no control over it. He doesn't know when it's going to happen. It just suddenly does, and then he's in another place. In addition to that, he ends up in another place with no clothes. So, of course, then he's got to find clothes and keep himself safe, and make sure that nothing happens to him while he's on these time travel ventures. Sometimes he even meets himself, which is, kind of startling in its own way. So he's been involuntarily time traveling up through his mid to late 20s when we meet him at the very beginning of the story. And he's working in an academic library, a college library, and suddenly he sees this 20-year-old girl, and she runs towards him, and she knows him, she loves him. They have something great together, but for him, he's never seen her before. But she's known him his entire life, and you're just kind of spellbound by, how is that possible? And you realize that this woman eventually becomes his wife, becomes the time traveler's wife. And it's that star-crossed lover story that so many of us are fond of, where how do they make this work when they come together and he is just ripped from her for, no real reason other than he involuntarily time travels. How does that impact their relationship? And how does he deal with going to different points in his past, and sometimes even in his future? What happens to these two characters, and how do they make it all work? And what starts to happen when the time travel becomes more dangerous for him, and what do they do about that? And I'm being careful about what I'm saying because I don't want to spoil the story, but it's a very compelling tale, very much a love story, but also, what the implications of time travel can be and what the difficulties of it can be. I remember there's a particular scene, and I won't give it away, but there's a particular scene when he's in the library, and there's a room where they have this gigantic structure, this big iron structure with all these bars and things like that. And he looks at it with a sense of foreboding and thinking, what if I get trapped in there? What if I time travel and that's where I end up? And I can't escape. And people find me. And just there are all these different questions that he comes upon, and all these different ways that she tries to love him and to understand him. And like I said, it's really a very intricately and interestingly told tale about how this is going to work. How, when they decide to have a child, how is that going to work? Will the child have that same chronodisplacement order? Can he be cured? You have to read the story to find out. Now, this is another interesting book by Audrey Niffenegger, who is currently working on the sequel to this story. She started it in 2013. I'm kind of secretly hoping that she's had more time to herself as of late, like we all have, and she's had more time to write on it. I can't tell you the title, and I can't tell you what it's about because it would give away a lot of things in this story, but I think it's going to be really interesting when she finally comes out with it. So I definitely recommend reading this story first and then looking out for that sequel. And like I said, it was made into a movie, and I thought they did as well as they could with an 1.5 to 2 hour running time. But as many librarians will tell you, the book was better. So definitely consider checking out The Time Traveler's Wife. It also is in Libby. One of my favorite time travel stories of all, Stephen King, 11/22/63. Now I have some interesting things to say about Stephen King. He scares the pants off of me. He really does. My very first experience with Stephen King would have been in high school in the 90s when The Stand was showing as a mini-series. I think it was on NBC. And I grew up in Georgia, right outside Atlanta, and everyone in my community in Norcross, Georgia, was watching this mini-series. My parents were watching it. For some crazy reason, they let me and my younger brother, Frank, watch it. Everybody was watching it, and everybody was terrified and spellbound, to the extent that I went to a math class, and some poor kid in my class started coughing and sneezing, and everyone just jumped 10 feet back because they were freaked out about this, about the super flu. I believe I mentioned The Stand in one of my other presentations about how if you don't mind cutting it too close to reality, it's a really compelling tale to read. So with that all in mind, I thought to myself, well, Stephen King, wow, he is an amazing storyteller, but I don't think I can read his books because I just can't stomach horror. I have a great appreciation for the genre. However, I already have an overactive imagination that causes me to have some crazy dreams, and I thought Stephen King might add some fodder in there that I don't need. But I heard about 11/22/63, and I saw the cover, and I saw that it had JFK and his wife on it, and I was, kind of puzzled by that. Like, I wonder what this book is about. And then I saw the trailer for the Hulu miniseries of 11/22/63, and that really caught my attention. I thought, the time travel tale. Well, that's really interesting. It has to do with JFK. And I thought, well, maybe I should give that a shot because, when I can, I like to try to read the book before I see the miniseries or the movie. And I thought, well, I'm a little older now. Maybe I can give this a shot. And JFK has always fascinated me. My parents were high school sweethearts in Palatka, and both of them can tell in vivid detail exactly where they were when they heard JFK was shot. Much like I could vividly tell you, as can my husband, where we were when 9/11 occurred. So, and I've always been fascinated by the 50s and 60s. Like I said, that was the era that my parents were kids and teens. That's when they grew up. I think it's one of the reasons I like Back to the Future, the movie, where he gets to meet his parents for the first time. So I thought, I'm gonna give this a try. And it's a fascinating tale because at its core, it's about what would happen if you could go back in time and stop the assassination of JFK. What would that prevent? Who would that save? How would the world be different? And when I heard that premise, I thought, well, how on earth do you get back there anyway? Well, believe it or not, you get back there via a portal in a diner that takes you back to September 9th, 1958, I think at 11:58 in the morning. First time is every time is the first time, as Al Templeton, the diner owner, likes to say. And when you come back, no matter how long you've spent in the past, 1 year, 5 years, 20 years, or even just an hour, only 2 minutes passes in the current time. So you've got all these rules set up ahead of time, and you meet Jay Epping, and he's the English teacher, and his student, who's a GED student, is a janitor, which of course is a nice tip of the hat to Stephen King, who started as a janitor when he wrote Carrie. And he tells about the day that changed his life, the day that his father brutally murdered his family with a hammer. And you realize that Al is asking Jake to go back in time and stop the assassination of JFK, which means he'd have to stay in the past for 5 years. So he decides to do a trial run first, see if maybe he can save Harry, the janitor's family first, because they die on Halloween night in 1958, which takes you back to a little place you may know in the book It, and the movie It, which is Derry, Maine. So that's a nice another little Easter egg for Stephen King fans. And I won't give anything else away, but it really put you in the shoes of the protagonist, Jake Epping, and you really felt like you went back to the 50s and 60s for all the good and the bad and the in-between. And like I said, within the first 100 or 200 pages, this book is 900 pages long, I got to the end and I needed more. I was like, why is this ending? I need more. Within the first 100 or 200 pages, I thought to myself, now where's the enemy? Stephen King always has an incredible nemesis. It's either a person, or it's an animal, or it's some sort of force. What is the big bad in the story? And you find this out pretty quickly. The big bad in the story is the past itself, because the past itself does not want to be changed, and it will fight against you if you try to change it. And the bigger change you're trying to make, the more it's going to fight against you. So the past is very much the antagonist in the story, very much a dark force, but it's an incredible story, and it's about so much more than JFK or time travel. It's so much a bigger story than that, and I really, really recommend it. The miniseries, I thought, did an okay job. I don't think it was nearly long enough to encompass this book. They had to change a lot. They had to leave a lot out. I did enjoy it, but the book was incredible. I listened to the audiobook like once a year. I love it that much, and I fall right back into the story, and it's just a great mental health break. It's a great escape, and I think time travel books really can do that for you. They really take you on an adventure to a whole nother time and place, and really ask you, what would you do if this were you? So I really, really recommend 11/22/63, and it's also available in Libby. Now, we're getting into some books that I'm not as familiar with, but I still want to talk about them. And this one is Me and Mr. Darcy. I'm a huge Pride and Prejudice fan. I love Jane Austen. And I've noticed that both with teen books, which I'm going to mention in a minute, and adult books, they seem to love to have stories where characters in the present fall into Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And what would it be like to be in Regency England and wear those clothes and those manners? And women have so little autonomy. Is it as romantic as we put it out to be, or is it really that fish out of water tale where, oh my goodness, what on earth would I do? And in this story, Me and Mr. Darcy, this big Pride and Prejudice fan goes on a tour of sorts of England, and inadvertently time travels and ends up not only time traveling, but literary traveling, and meets Mr. Darcy herself. And you get to kind of imagine what it would be like if you met Mr. Darcy, and what would that experience be like? Who is he really? And how would you respond to him? How would he respond to you, somebody who's clearly not from that time? So I think Pride and Prejudice time travel is definitely a favorite of mine, because it not only gives you the opportunity to time travel to a different point in history, it gives you the opportunity to literally jump inside of one of your own books and experience the tale for yourself. Which, this one is for adults, Me and Mr. Darcy. This one is for teens, Prada and Prejudice, and it's such a cute story. A girl goes on, I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. She goes on a trip with her classmates to England. I don't think she's studying abroad. I think it's just a trip. That's what I was tripping over. she goes on a trip with her classmates to England. I believe she's a junior in high school. And she's trying to fit in with these popular girls, and it's not working. She goes and buys these incredibly tall red Prada heels, and just like I would if I tried to wear these tall red Prada heels, she goes flying as soon as she gets on the cobblestone. And next thing she knows, she wakes up and she's in the time period of Austen and of Pride and Prejudice, and she walks up to somebody's door and they can't believe she's wearing jeans, and who is she? And she has to kind of make up this whole story about herself, this whole backstory, and she has to desperately figure out how she's going to get back. But in the meantime, how is she going to fit into these times? And can she help the young girl that she's met that is kind of trapped by those times? And what does she think of the people in that era? And certainly, what do they think of her? Because she's very, very modern. So it was a really cute take on Pride and Prejudice, and it was just a really fun read. And even though it's a book written for teens, I enjoyed it as an adult as well. So it was a lot of fun to see how that all worked. Quite a few books in the teen department are really great about they're like riffs on popular, or I should say classic fiction. So there's quite a few tales in there where they take like a classic tale and they give a modern twist, or in this instance, they take a modern heroine and send her back to an era and a literary book and let her live it out and see how it all works. So Pride and Prejudice, a really fun book and also available on Libby. So now we've got a book of Spirits and Thieves, a series by Morgan Rhodes. And this is one of those tales that I feel like as a reader I really related to, because basically it's about two sisters, one who ends up time traveling, one that does not, and kind of how they're trying to help each other get back together. And the girl that does end up time traveling quite literally falls into this book and falls right into the story, like dropped from the sky, right into this story. And what is she going to do? It's totally foreign to her. She wasn't expecting it. She has no idea how to make this all work. And her sister is on the other side, still in the present. And how are they going to work together to, in a sense, save her from this story? So a really compelling read, and I enjoyed it because, like I said, I think as a reader, I feel like that's kind of what I do. I feel like I fall into a story and I get to kind of escape everyday life for a while, and I'm a part of the story, and I'm in the story, and I'm invested in the story. But what would happen if instead I really was in the story, and the story took place in a completely different time, different place? How would I survive? How would I deal? What would I do? So I think that's one of the great things about time travel books is, like I said, they put you right in the driver's seat and ask the question of you, what now? How would you respond? What would you do? Also, Passenger is much the same way by Alexander Bracken. And again, it's another one of those tales where someone time travels to a totally different time period, this time on a ship. And again, what do you do? How do you respond to that? How do you make that? How do you make that work? Especially if that's a time period you don't really know anything about. So you don't know how men and women's, what their roles are, how they're supposed to talk, how they're supposed to act, what's going to get you in trouble and what's not going to get you in trouble. One common thread in all of these tales is that the fish out of water, the narrator, has to find a way to blend in to such an extent that they're not going to immediately be put on trial for being a witch, or be thought of as like an alien, or become part of a science experiment. So it's really interesting to figure out how does that narrator deal with that challenge, and what do they do? What do they learn from it? What did they take away from the story? Why did they get transported back to that time? Was it a random thing, or was there some fate behind why they went to that particular time? So again, another great series, a romance, an adventure. And a lot of times with time travel books, what's great is they're not just one kind of genre. They're not just a romance, or they're not just science fiction, or they're not just adventure. They're a lot of different things. They're just life taking place in a totally different time period, and just seeing what happens next. Now, there's some great time travel books for kids too. In fact, the next three that I'm going to mention have all been either Sunshine State Readers or Sunshine State Reader Juniors in the last few years. So double your money. If you're looking for your child to read something that's really intriguing as well as a Sunshine State Reader, look no further. Ben Franklin's In My Bathroom is a really fun book because it kind of takes time travel and turns it on its head. Normally the narrator is the one that jumps back in time or jumps forward in time. This time, the kids are here in the present day. It's Ben Franklin who travels forward in time to them. And what are they going to learn from him? And how is he going to deal with what is the future for him? And there's a second book in this series, and I believe it's about Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's the same concept where she's jumped forward in time. And how are they going to help this person who is the fish out of water? What are they going to learn from them? And what are they going to do when they suddenly show up? How on earth do you explain that? So a lot of really fun ways to learn about history and historical figures with a twist. Instead of just learning about them from the past and there's that sense of detachment, instead they've jumped forward and you're getting to learn about how you would relate to them in the present day. There's also Ranger in Time. I love when animal protagonists get to be center stage, because the great thing about an animal protagonist, the main character, is it appeals both to boys and to girls. And Ranger in Time is about a dog who time travels. And not only does he time travels to different places and he helps other people. So there's a purpose behind his time traveling. He's there to aid them. In this first story, he goes back in time to the Oregon Trail and is helping people during what was an incredibly difficult time. And there's several books in this series, and he jumps around to all sorts of different time periods and is helping people. So for those who are animal lovers or enjoy animals as the protagonist, or just looking for a good tale of how a good dog can help people all around the globe through different periods of history, then this series is for you. It really is wonderful. And like I said, a very unique and interesting way to learn about history as opposed to just learning about that time period. You're getting to quite literally travel with your pet through time and to see what he can do. So lots of fun. Rescue on the Oregon Trail. Time Jumpers. This is a Scholastic Branches book. And one of the things that's wonderful about Scholastic Branches books is they're basically more complex than the beginning readers, but less complex than a full-blown chapter book. So they're great for that emergent reader who's just starting chapters, because they're kind of hybrid kind of books. They have, the words aren't super small, there's a lot of pictures, it's a very engaging story, so it's a great bridge for the child that's learned how to read, but maybe isn't ready for Harry Potter, A Wrinkle in Time, something with a ton of words, but not a whole bunch of pictures. So the Scholastic Branches series on the whole is really wonderful. And this is about two kids who jump through time and have all sorts of adventures, very much like the Magic Treehouse, which I'm about to get to. So of course, I think a lot of these stories were inspired by their grandparent, the Magic Treehouse, standing on the shoulders of giants. And Time Jumpers, I believe, was a Sunshine State Reader Junior in the last couple of years. It helps that I was a youth services librarian for so long before becoming reference and adult services. So again, another great series. I think there's 3 or 4 books in this series. And again, just a fun way to interact with historical fiction and jump through time. The first book in the series, which was the Sunshine State Reader Junior, was Stealing the Sword. And last but certainly not least, like I said, the grandfather of children's books in terms of time travel, the Magic Treehouse. It's been around forever. And it's a wonderful, wonderful series. My daughter just started it in the 3rd grade. But depending on what your child's reading level is, they could start it earlier, they could start it later, just depends. And it's about 2 kids, Jack and Annie. I'm hoping I'm remembering these names right. I'm pretty sure I am. Jack and Annie, who have a magical treehouse, and the treehouse takes them to all sorts of different places and times. And in this adventure, the very first one, they go back to the age of dinosaurs. What kid isn't fascinated with dinosaurs? And imagine being alive in the age of dinosaurs. What on earth would you do? How would you avoid that T-Rex? Would you take a ride on a pterodactyl? So they go all sorts of places, and they make history and historical fiction and learning about all these different time periods so much fun, because you're right on that magic carpet ride with them. And like I said, the Magic Treehouse books is a series that's been around for a long time, and I have no doubt it's going to be around for a long time since. So that was the last time travel book I had. I hope that you'll mention any wonderful time travel books you've read that you really enjoyed, or comment about some of the ones that I've mentioned, and of course mention in the comments any future presentations that you would like to see. I encourage you to use your library card or get an e-card from our library's website, sjcpls.org, and dive into Libby and start checking out some of these time travel reads. Like I said, they're fascinating, they're compelling. I do recommend, if it's a series, read it in order so you don't spoil yourself. But most of all, just see what kind of time traveling you can do right from your own couch, from your armchair, from your own bed. Thank you again for joining me today. Be safe and be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.